What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Today is Monday, which means Monday Mail Day. I got a great show because I got great questions, so shout out to everybody that contributed. If I didn't get to your questions this week, try again next week or come up with a new question. Let's get right into it. First question, a lot of Bradley questions, so I'm going to try to group those together. A lot of questions from Bradley as he just fought. Now, first question comes from The Diesel. Bradley is a great fighter that always leaves it in the ring. Why does he feel like he has something to prove at unnecessary times in his fights? He can beat guys easy if he sticks to what he does best. Bottom line from me, in my opinion, I think Bradley is a competitive person, highly competitive. And Andre Ward spoke on that because they fought when they were kids, about 14, 15 in the amateurs. Andre Ward says that was one of my toughest fights because the guy doesn't give up. So I think being competitive. Also, I think he's an emotional fighter. What I mean by that is he lets his emotions get the best of him at times. And there's other fighters like that, like the Durrell brothers seem like that. You look at the Sakio Bika Durrell rematch, they both had talked to Genghis stuff. And early, the fight was kind of sloppy. And I think Anthony Durrell, he's the better boxer. Sakio Bika is always kind of awkward and sloppy. But I think Durrell could have sharpened up. And he did later in the half. That's why he won that fight in the rematch. But some fighters are just emotional. And they think with emotion. And he's dealt with different backlash. I think another thing is he doesn't get the proper credit. You know what I mean? He got backlash for beating Pacquiao because a lot of people thought Pacquiao got robbed and they're sending him death threats. And I think he took that negative energy in the wrong way. And he probably reads comments on videos and stuff, and people want to see warriors. A lot of casual fans, it's easy if you don't have the right mindset to not fight your right fight because you're reading comments like, oh, I'm not a light puncher. I could knock people out, or I'm not a punk. You know what I mean? And then you get caught up in the casual game, and then you end up not fighting the right fight. I think he did that in the fight with Ruslan Provodnikov. He had this chip on his shoulder from the Pacquiao fight, and he carried it into this particular fight. Went in with the guy who's clearly the bigger puncher and a strong puncher in general, and he's banging like he's Triple G or whatever. He's gonna knock Ruslan, who actually has a tough chin, like he's going to knock him out. You know what I mean? And it just wasn't. He should have stuck to what he knows, which is boxing, brawling when need be. And Roy Jones Jr. always says it. Roy Jones is very smart in terms of commentary and boxing. You bang the boxer and you box the brawler. You know what I'm saying? Like that type of attitude. But Bradley, he goes on rogue missions and does his own thing. Even though his corner, Joel Diaz, gives him great. Every single time I seen Bradley detour and do whatever he wants, Joel Diaz was giving him the right instructions. So shout out to Joel, very underrated in terms of trainers. Bradley, again, just some people you can't tell them anything. You know what I mean? And he kind of goes on his own path, and you know what I mean, goes AWOL and does his own thing. So it's just who he is as a fighter and as a person, I guess. But I mean, he only has one loss, and that's to Pacquiao. So it's not really a loss to be ashamed of. And I thought he beat Diego Chavez. I don't even think it was a draw. So I mean, it is what it is. That's how he fights. And I think just ultimately it's those two things, him being a competitive person and also carrying his emotions into the fight, which leads to him making fights tougher than they need to be. Like he wants to prove that he has punching power because he reads the articles or comments that says he's feather-fisted Bradley. So he goes out and puts on the show the best way he knows how. Next question is from 888 Compact. And the question is, who do you want to see Tim Bradley to fight next? Do you think him versus Khan or Brook would be good? I like any of those fights. I think Timothy Bradley is an elite level welterweight to me. I like him. I like what he brings. I think he's marketable. He's had enough televised performances, big fights, 2 fights with Pacquiao, Diego Chavez on HBO, this fight on HBO with Vargas. So I want to see him with any of the top guys. Earl Spence, Amir Khan. That's a fight that was supposed to happen years ago when they were at 140. They're both at 47. Make that happen. A fight with Kell Brook. He's like, he needs a title shot or a credible name like that. You know what I mean? I don't want to see him backtracking and start fight. You know what I mean? Fight like a Josito Lopez, someone who's not going to really give him much credit if he were to beat them. So any guy, Mayweather, I think and there's another question, and I'll expand on it a little bit more, but he's definitely worthy of a Mayweather fight. Keith Thurman is also a great fight and got a great stylistic fight. So I'm good with any of those options. Sean Porter even. Maidana. I mean, these are all good fights. I would literally entertain Bradley versus any of them, because he has an exciting style, sometimes being that loose cannon. Like, different people become exciting for different reasons. Amir Khan to me is exciting to watch because his speed and also because his chin. I don't really rely on his chin, so it's a roller coaster ride because you don't really know what he's gonna do. You know what I mean? You don't know how his chin's gonna hold up. And I feel the same thing with Bradley. Bradley is a warrior, and sometimes he doesn't fight and make sound decisions. So we watch him for that, because it's like, what is Bradley gonna do? Like versus Marquez, I told people on my video, I said, if he fights like he fought Ruslan, he's getting knocked out. Marquez is not the one to play with. He's an awesome counter puncher. He has some power. He knocked Pacquiao out, so you don't want to make those mistakes. So I definitely tuned into that fight to see how Bradley looked. And to me, he boxed like the perfect fight for a style like Marquez. It's just in some of his other fights, he doesn't fight like that. He fights kind of reckless, like the Ruslan and Vargas fights. So it is what it is. I'm good with any of those options. Next question comes from Jack C 3D. Ego, do you honestly feel that Vargas was robbed of a win? Please give your thoughts on this. Also, do you think Bradley would be a great opponent for Mayweather for September? What about Bradley fighting Triple G at 160? Do you think he's ready for that? Love your videos and keep up the great work. Great question. I'm gonna someone else asked me about Mayweather Bradley, so I'm gonna expand on that portion of your question and answer the other two. Me, I don't want to see Bradley move out of welterweight personally. I think he does lack power. He's an exciting fighter. Not even just lacking power, his measurements. He's short. He's shorter than Pacquiao. You know what I mean? So if he were to go up to 154, 160, I think that, not saying he's not ready for those challenges, like in terms of he won't take them, because I think he's a warrior and he probably would take any of those fights with Canelo. I just think he's too small. I don't know if he has the power to ward off those guys that big, and he's a short fighter. So, I mean, I'll watch anything, and if that's what him and his team decide they want to do. But truthfully, I would give Triple G more credit for beating somebody closer to his size and not like a welterweight. You know what I'm saying? If he were to beat a guy like anybody, Carl Froch, David Lemieux, you know what I mean? I give him more credit than beating up a guy who at welterweight, you know what I'm saying, who's not even really big. So I don't want to see that. I don't even want to see him move up to 54. I just think he's kind of small and that kind of thing. And then the first part of the question, do you honestly feel Vargas was robbed? I mean, this is the thing. This is the issue with that. Obviously, in a perfect world, no mistakes will be made. Pat Russell made a mistake. He made a gross error, and he didn't give Jessie Vargas the opportunity of basically 7 seconds. 7 seconds remaining on the clock. I get it. In a perfect world, nobody makes mistakes. But the fact is, he's an older ref. He hasn't made that many egregious decisions like that I remember. Like CJ Ross has turned in multiple bad scorecards. So I don't really remember Pat Russell where he just did something so ridiculous. Some people, like the Mike Alvarado Rios stoppage, I thought that was warranted. Mike Alvarado looked gone, and he took too many unanswered punches in that first fight. Some people said it was premature. I didn't see it as being premature. So again, you got to cut the man slack. He made a mistake, and it is what it is. And you have to be realistic. Now, if Jessie Vargas, and this is what I said in my post fight, if Jessie Vargas did more throughout the fight, then I would understand his argument more, because it would have at that point been a close fight. But on my scorecard, I literally had Jessie Vargas winning 2 rounds, the 12th and the second round. And if you were to give him a third round somewhere in there, please explain why. And it's more of a generosity thing, because those are the only 2 rounds where I thought he convincingly won those rounds. You know what I mean? So in the grand scheme of things, he needed a knockout to win, and he had 7 seconds to do it, and he's not a knockout artist. He has like 8 or 9 knockouts on his resume. Now, if you give John Molina, Ruslan Provodnikov, Lucas Matisse, Danny Garcia, somebody with pop 7 seconds, maybe they can get it done. But the fact that he was moving up in weight, I just look at all the variables. He moved up from 140 to 147. The fact that Bradley survived against Ruslan Provodnikov and took a knee, I mean, I just didn't see him being like, he had his senses about him. You know what I mean? I think he was more hurt in the 12th versus Ruslan Provodnikov, to be perfectly honest. And you got to keep in mind, if Bradley, let's say he went down, that still wouldn't have won Jessie Vargas the fight. Also, all he had to do is take a knee, right? Take a knee, and you can't hit a downed opponent or you'll get disqualified, or you can get a point taken away or whatever. All Bradley had to do is take a knee and be able to stand back up. And if you look at the onslaught, Jessie Vargas hit him with the best punch of the whole fight that he could possibly throw. It was perfect, feet planted. He got the full leverage on it. Bradley ate it flush and didn't even go down. And then after the follow-up, I don't know if Jessie Vargas may have been tired from getting beat up for 11 rounds, 10 rounds or whatever, but he was missing a lot of punches. He's not a finisher like that. You know what I'm saying? He went to the body and it was kind of low, and then Bradley ducked this. He still has some senses about him. So again, all Bradley had to do was literally take a knee and be able to stand back up. Because if he took a knee, Vargas can't hit him. And to really honestly think, I know it's a bit of foreshadowing, but to think that a veteran like Timothy Bradley, who's been there before in that same predicament, fought Pacquiao with injuries in both fights, doesn't have the common sense to clinch for 7 seconds or take a knee. It's just, I find it very hard to believe that he would have got knocked out, to be honest. So, I mean, people, obviously, there's the what if factor, so people are always going to spin it how they want. But me, I look at it like this. If Vargas did more in the fight, then he would have had a stronger argument. But he's banking his whole fiasco of a performance on one punch being landed. And fights are 3-minute rounds. That fight was a 12-rounder. And we're talking about what he did in a matter of like 12 seconds. And holding our whole argument on what didn't happen or did happen in a mistake situation. Why didn't you do that earlier in the fight? And then we wouldn't have had to worry about this and so. And again, I understand Pat Russell made a mistake, but he's human. He's not like a robot. He's not perfect. And it's not like he's accustomed to these egregious decisions. So I honestly don't think he was robbed, because I don't think the outcome would have been any different. Because in my book, Vargas needed a pure knockout or a pure TKO stoppage. And the other thing is, he's the one that started celebrating. You know what I mean? He started celebrating and thinking he won and jumping on the turnbuckle and like putting his arms up and stuff like that. So I really feel after he heard the instruction, Pat Russell said fight's over, because he thought he heard the bell, and he added to the fiasco because he ran off like, oh yeah, I won. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And he celebrated a little bit premature too. So it's a bad situation just because you have the what if factory, but I don't think the outcome would have changed one bit, because I think Bradley's a veteran. And we're not talking about a known finisher. John Molina, okay, he's a known puncher and he has that style. So if he gets you hurt, he could probably finish you, or like a Ruslan or whoever. But that's not really Jessie Vargas' style. And I think he should have done something more throughout the fight, through the entirety, and he would have had a stronger argument, because it could have made, like, if that was the deciding factor. But realistically, it was KO or lose. And I just don't think he would have got the KO. So that's my honest opinion. Next question is from Marquise Monroe. Yo, Ego, would you like to see Bradley versus Ali? I got a feeling that matchup will be made. Saddam Ali is actually the mandatory challenger to Bradley. It was Bradley versus Vargas for the WBO interim title, and Saddam Ali was the mandatory for that. So I think that fight will be made as well. And it's a good fight. You have an undefeated Saddam Ali. You have a once defeated Tim Bradley. It's a good fight. Interesting clash of styles. And it'll by far be the best person that Saddam Ali has been in with as a pro. Saddam Ali also beat Luis Carlos Abregu, but so did Bradley. Bradley was the first to beat him. You know what I mean? Saddam Ali looked good and actually stopped him, but they both have wins over that mutual opponent. So I like the fight a lot. I think it's a great fight. Interesting clash of styles, and it's a fight that can be made. Bradley with Top Rank, and then Saddam Ali is with Golden Boy. So it's a fight that I think can be made, should be made, and it's a good style matchup for a title. Next question is from Pablo Alameda. What do you think of Bradley versus Matisse at 145? I love that fight. I don't like catchweight, so I think Matisse is big enough. I've seen him in his offseason. I think he should just move up to 147 and try to go after a title. You know what I mean? I'm not too big on catchweights in general, especially if it's for a title. So it's just, to me, I think that's a great fight, and I like the matchup, but I'd rather see it at 147. Bradley's been on record saying that Matisse is the hardest puncher he's been in with, so why not? You know what I mean? That's a good fight. Bradley always mixes up. Like I said earlier in this video, you never know what you're going to get with Bradley. And Matisse is not just a reckless Ruslan come-forward brawler. That's why he beat Ruslan, because he's more of a boxer-puncher with an immense amount of power. So, interesting fight, but I'd rather see it at 147. I love the matchup, and that's a good fight. Next question is from Ruben Escobedo. Hey, Ego, do you think Tim Bradley deserves a Mayweather fight more than any other welterweight. He officially holds wins over Pac and Marquez and is more proven than Khan, Brook, Berto, etc. Great work as always. And also, Mark James asked a very similar question. Hey, what's going on, Ego? Although it's unlikely of promo companies, because of promo companies, what do you think of Mayweather versus Bradley? Not only in general, but as his last fight, quote unquote. People like to shit on this matchup, but I actually see it being a little competitive. And to me, Bradley deserves it more than any other welterweight. So it sounds like Mark and Ruben are on the same page. And I'm going to say it again. Bradley versus Mayweather is a great fight. It's a meaningful fight. Without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, even you can even throw Golovkin in there. Bradley has a better resume than anybody at welterweight, not named Mayweather or Pacquiao. You know what I'm saying? It's a fact. He has a better resume than Golovkin. I like Golovkin, and I'm not talking. See, this is the thing, because I know people are trying to trip me up. Golovkin's a more dangerous fight, Ego. You don't know shit about boxing. I'm not talking about the actual fight and what would happen if Golovkin could beat Mayweather or Bradley could. I'm not even giving fight predictions. What I'm talking about is who deserves it. Bradley deserves it more than really anybody. Like, because he's done more at welterweight than Amir Khan, having a win over Pacquiao. You look at, he has a win over Vargas. He's been in there. He was the first. See, people don't realize this. Bradley is a body snatcher. He's taken the O's from a couple of fighters. Now, again, I've asked this question in previous videos. Who is the last undefeated fighter that Triple G, Gennady Golovkin, has beaten? And then you look at that person, who was that? Who were they in the grand scheme of things or in the division versus Bradley? He beat Jessie Vargas, who's younger than him, and you know what I mean, he dominated him other than the 12th round and the second round, right? And Vargas even though I think he's got some gift decisions or whatever, he's still game, he's still younger, he's still fresher than Bradley, and other people at least had tight, close fights. This was like pretty much a blowout for Bradley, -2 rounds. You know what I mean? Bradley beat Pacquiao, whether you like it or not. He beat him on paper. He was the champion. He beat Ruslan Provodnikov. He beat Marquez, who's a certain Hall of Famer. He snatched the O's from Luis Carlos Abregu, Jessie Vargas, Devin Alexander, and Lamont Peterson, if I'm not mistaken. Lamont Peterson might have had a defeat before. I'm not sure, but I know Devin Alexander. So, again, who deserves it more? Who has done more than that at welterweight? I like a lot of the players at welterweight. I'll be frank. I'll be perfectly honest. I love watching Keith Thurman, stuff like that. But his biggest win is Diego Chavez, who was undefeated. Props. He stopped him. And Robert Guerrero, who had already been beaten in the lighter division by Salido. That was overturned, and it was a no contest. And at welterweight, he had tough fights with Iden, tough fights with Berto, and then he lost to Mayweather. So, I mean, that's Keith Thurman. Like, he's doing what he needs to do, but you can't put Robert Guerrero over Juan Manuel Marquez in my book. You know what I'm saying? So, the fact that Bradley has a clean-cut, in my opinion, win over him, and guys like Ruslan. And you have to look at the timing. Some people are like, oh, Ruslan, he's been outboxed by Chris Algieri and all this and that. But look at when Bradley fought him. When Bradley fought him, Ruslan had only lost, I think, to Mauricio Herrera, if I'm not mistaken. You know what I mean? So at the time Bradley fought him, he was extremely dangerous. And I think Bradley was off of a long layoff from an injury in the Pacquiao fight, the first fight. So it's just, Bradley deserves it. There's no other way to put it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Brook, he's kind of backtracked a bit since the Porter win. That's his best win. And then he kind of backtracked. So his resume, his best names on his resume, Sean Porter, Sinchenko, Carson Jones. Like, you know what I mean? Like, none of these names compared to Devin Alexander at that time. I'm not talking about Devin Alexander now after Khan beat him and stuff. I'm talking about when Timothy Bradley beat him. That was a grudge match. I don't know if you guys remember the build-up, but they were talking shit about each other, and there's a build-up. I mean, I remember Tim Bradley's like, yeah, Devin Alexander, if everything's right, if the money's right, you could be next. Like, you know what I mean? They were beefing. Lamont Peterson, you know what I mean? It just, Kendall Holt. There's just too many names. He has too many bodies on his resume. So, yes, I love the fight for Mayweather. A lot of people complain they want to see Mayweather against a black person, a black fighter. Shit, Bradley's the most deserving out of all the black fighters. You know what I mean? Devin Alexander, Kell Brook, Keith Thurman, Demetrius Andrade. Again, I'm not talking about who poses the most problems, because some people are like, oh, Demetrius Andrade's 6 foot and this. That's cool. I'm not talking about fight predictions and who you think will win and what will be the most complex fight for Floyd. I'm talking about who deserves it. Demetrius Andrade, yeah, he could give problems to Floyd with his height, his southpaw stance, but he doesn't deserve it more. He beat Vanes Martirosyan, then Brian Rose, and nobody's seen him since, other than a few call-out videos. So Bradley by far deserves it more than anybody else. The bad side is I don't think it will happen, because just how the Pacquiao-Mayweather fight went and the co-promoting, and then after Bob Arum and Pacquiao's team, Mayweather feels disrespected because they started coming out with all the woodwork with these injuries and shoulder excuses and stuff. So I don't think Mayweather and his team would be in a real rush to work with Bob Arum and Top Rank again and give them money. But as a fight, I love the fight, and I think it's a great fight. If they can make that in September, you'll have my money for it, because I have no problem paying for that. Bradley deserves it. Next question is from Jeff C. Forget to mention this last week, but what happened to all those Ward is boring and couldn't fill up a kitchen sink people? Seems like they are running out of excuses to give Ward credit or have him face Triple G. What do you think of that? And should Ward fight DeGale or Kovalev next if the Triple G fight doesn't happen? Now, I covered that fight. It looked full to me. You know what I mean? The crowd, the energy was there. And I've been to other fights before. So I don't know what this whole thing is. And that was actually a bad night, because you had two other great fights on also. You had Hassan Indam and David Lemieux, as well as Adrian Broner. So, you know what I mean? I was actually, to be 100% frank, and I'm from the Bay, I was surprised that there were so many people there based on how many other great fights, because I know a lot of interest was in Broner Porter specifically. So I was surprised how many people actually showed up. And, you know what I mean, some people, even if they live in the Bay, they might want to stay home and watch Broner Porter on TV. That's what I thought. But the crowd turnout was cool. There was no problem. I did a documentary, so check that on the channel, with Andre Ward. It was kind of recapping. It was like a behind the scenes look and recapping. I'm going to continue doing those, because a lot of people were asking me for different content like that. As far as Triple G, this is my thing. I'm going to keep saying it and keep saying it until my face is blue. Triple G is a good fighter, but he doesn't have the resume. And you got to look at this. Triple G has been far more active than Andre Ward. And just listen to me, because people are like, oh, you stupid ego. Oh. You know what I mean? And people get mad at me. But disprove what I'm saying. Tell me I'm wrong. Explain how I'm wrong with this point. Now, just listen. Triple G has been far more active than Andre Ward. That's a fact. There's no one that could dispute that. Andre Ward had a shoulder injury, then he had shoulder surgery, then he had shoulder rehab, then he had legal problems with Goose and Tudor Promotions or whatnot, right? So he fought like 2 times in the last 3 years, and one was just recently. So at one point it was like he had one fight in like 2.5 years or 3 years or whatever it was, right? Versus Triple G, who's been fighting 3, 4, maybe 5. I don't know if he hit quite 5 in a year, but he's been fighting often. And Triple G is older than Andre Ward. So explain this to me. Given Andre Ward's inactivity of 2-3 years, right? I'm just rounding up. 2 or 3 years, barely fighting. How come Triple G's resume, as it sits right now, if they both got injuries, God forbid, and were to retire, how come Andre Ward, his resume is supreme to Triple G's, who's been actively fighting? You know what I mean? You got a fighter who's fighting 2 times in 3 years, 1 time in 3 years, or whatever it was, and a guy who's been fighting 3 to 4 times in a year, per year, for the last couple of years. And you mean to tell me the inactive guy still has a better resume? That goes to show you that was some matchmaking involved. So I'm going to say it, and I'm going to keep saying it and keep saying it. I like Triple G. He's a good fighter. I'm not bashing him. But if you, for whatever reason, let's say you're being ducked, I'll take your word for it, because I do think he is being ducked, and I'll make a separate video about that. I do think he's being ducked. But at 33, 34 years old, when are you going to put your foot down and take a stand? You can't force COTTO, who's a quote-unquote A-side, to fight you. It's just not going to happen. He already said, oh, I don't care about a belt. I already have my legacy. He needs to wait in line. And it says all this stuff. You can't fight Carl Froch to not retire and fight you. So what are you going to do for your career? What are you and your team going to do for your career to catapult your star fighter who has the potential to become a thing, like Pacquiao beat Barrera and was the man, and you know what I mean, fights with Marquez and stuff made him the man, and De La Hoya, Ricky Hatton, all these fights made Pacquiao the man. Triple G's on the cusp of that. But the thing is, people want to see him face the echelon of fighters that we can really say, okay, this dude is really certified. He beat X, Y, and Z. He beat Ward. He beat the brakes off Carl Froch. He beat this person. He's that dude, right? So that's the thing. Triple G and his team at age 33 or 34, whatever age he is, they need to decide, hey, we're getting ducked by Oscar De La Hoya's fighters, Canelo, Lemieux. I don't think these guys want to fight him for whatever reason. High risk, low reward, whatever, right? Peter Quillen's doing acting. I seen him post the other day. He's like, I'm in my acting class. I'm like, what? Are you even a fighter anymore? So if you're not getting the fights that you want, maybe a move up is rightful. Because if he moved up and he fought Ward, if he moved up and he fought James DeGale, even one of the Durrell brothers, he'll get a lot more credit than beating stiffs or guys that the world doesn't really rate highly. You know what I mean? Like Willie Monroe, his best win was Brian Vera, and it went the distance. And then Brian Vera just fought again recently and got stopped in the UK. You know what I'm saying? Who is, like, I'm not trying to clown, but who is Brian Vera? Like, literally, who is Brian Vera? A guy that's been stopped by James Kirkland, a guy who lost to Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., who one was controversial, but either way, he lost both times, who a lot of people think Chavez Jr. is overrated. So Brian Vera got knocked out by Gabe Rosado in the BKB. So really, Triple G just fought a guy with 6 knockouts, and his best win, very best win, was against Brian Vera, who isn't a world beater and lost most of his big fights, period. So I mean, Triple G, if he wants to stay at 160, that's cool, but people don't want to see him just stick around collecting bodies, beating guys. It's clear if you're a C, B level fighter, you probably can't beat Triple G. That's clear and apparent to me. So I think a Ward fight makes sense for that reason, because they need to expedite things, especially with Triple G's style. You don't know how long that style will last. He's very aggressive. I heard he trains hard, and you don't know how long that style will last in boxing. You know what I mean? Wear and tear on your body, your bones, your joints. You might get punched a lot, you know what I mean? Or whatever the situation. You don't know how long, you don't know the shelf life for a fighter like that. So, that being said, you got to do what's right for your career and take that plunge towards greatness. And if you're not getting it at 160, and you have the power to really hurt everybody at 160, and people are saying he hits like a light heavyweight, why not try to test the waters at 168, since it's more of a stacked division, and I think those guys would be more likely and inclined to fight you. Next question is from the Fighting Pride. Hey, Ego, great videos. Keep it up. What is your opinion on this Al Haymon busted by the California State Athletic Commission, busting Al Haymon for, quote-unquote, sabotaging other promoters' events, etc.? This whole StubHub situation with Chavez, Fanfare, Matisse, Provodnikov, and Russell Gonzalez. Now, I mean, I truthfully haven't really read up on it. I heard something about it. I know for a fact that there were a couple of fights they were trying to do Matisse, Provodnikov at the StubHub, and then I guess Al Haymon said he had the venue on reserve, so they pushed it to the East Coast, and then the Haymon fight that was on the same night, I think it was Jamel Charlo versus Vanes Martirosyan. They're like, oh, never mind, it's not at the StubHub. It's actually going to be in Las Vegas. So basically, they moved Matisse Provodnikov to the East Coast for no reason. So I mean, I really don't know the details to really comment about him being busted. I don't know how you would prove something like that. And to me, ultimately, what it comes down to is this is a business. It's cutthroat, period. Especially boxing. Boxing, out of all, you know what I mean? If I sell like fucking tea and crumpets or something, I'm sure the business, the industry is not as cutthroat. But boxing is grimy. You know what I mean? I know that firsthand from just what I've heard. I've talked to fighters and stuff. It's not a fun business. Like promoters even, like this fighter's winning, and then as soon as they start losing, the promoter don't care about the fight. You know what I mean? A lot of times. I'm not gonna say in every situation, but this is a business. It's cutthroat. So You got to do what you got to do to stay afloat and make sure your business is prevailing and thriving. And that's really what it is. I mean, it's no different. There's boxing channels on here right now who probably want to compete with me and, you know what I mean, hate what I'm doing or my movement. Like, I mean, you just can't really worry about that. And all I know is in the court of law, is your burden. If you're suing somebody, if someone tries to sue him for sabotaging, you have the burden of proving what you say is true. So I don't really know what they can do to prove and like win any kind of settlement. Like, oh, he sabotaged me. How do you prove a sabotage in a situation like that? Like, hey, I wanted the stub hub and he said he was like he was gonna use it and then he didn't use it. Like, especially as a promoter, things change. What if? I mean, it's just I don't see how they'll back him into a corner with that. To be honestly, be like, because you're not mandated that if you said just because you initially said you're fighting at the stub hub because you changed at the last minute, what are they gonna say? Like, oh, change of plans. We we wanted to change. We wanted this location or HBO or Showtime or whatever wanted this location. You know what I mean? It's not really. I don't really see much they can do, and I don't know really much other than that. I'll try to do some investigative work to see if there's any kind of facts behind it, but I just don't really see how you can prove what you're saying about the sabotage. Stuff like that becomes very hard to prove in the court of law. So I'll read up on it. Next question is from Fernandez Harris. Ego. Broner versus Provodnikov at 140. They're both coming off losses and their names still carry some weight. Is that a fight that will interest you? Maybe Broner versus Peterson at 140 or catchweight. Once again, they're both coming off losses. Good fights or nah? Boxing Ego. Just the second part of your question, Broner versus Peterson won't happen. They're very good friends. Actually, he's friends with Danny Garcia as well. But when Danny Garcia was fighting Peterson, Broner's like, they're both my boys, but Peterson's my dude. So he was actually rooting for Peterson. There's pictures of them together and hanging out. Their coaches are very good friends, Mike Stafford and Barry Hunter. So without a doubt, that fight's not happening. I really don't see Broner. There's two people that I don't see Broner fighting under really any circumstances: Mayweather and Lamont Peterson. So I don't think that'll happen, to be honest. So I'll stick to the first part of your question. Broner versus Provodnikov. Great fight. Broner, I mean, he struggles with volume. Guys come for guys when he's not having his way against like a smaller guy. I've seen him struggle. Pressure style fighters. At least Provodnikov can crack. He can be outboxed. So we'll see what Broner really has, because Broner's power, I keep saying this, at 130, 135 looked good. He looked real fast and sharp, but Broner's kind of all over the place to me. So it'd be interesting a fight like that. Chris Algieri is more of a boxer, so he was able to get a split decision over Provodnikov. Plus, if you look at it, everybody that Provodnikov has faced, except for maybe Matisse, and he did get banged up in some of the later rounds, but everyone else, their faces looked horrible. Bradley, Mauricio Herrera, Chris Algieri, their faces looked terrible after they fought Provodnikov. So it'd be interesting to see if Broner, with his inactivity in rounds, would be able to ward off a guy who's a tank and tough and can take a punch and keep coming. I mean, Provodnikov was taking heat from Matisse in those first two rounds. Heat. And he kept coming forward and made the second half a bit closer. You know what I mean? So I'd watch it in a heartbeat to see what Broner has. And it's like a make or break fight for Broner. So I'd watch it. And the very last question, Cristiano Mejia. Where's the best place to hold COTTO versus Canelo fight? Me, I think Vegas. Just keep it Vegas. Vegas is more of a neutral ground. It's not like, it's like California and Vegas, I would say, are very big melting pots. Vegas has a lot of tourists and stuff like that. And I'm not saying other areas don't have different demographics, but you look at it, if it were to happen in Texas, I would say that would benefit Canelo more than it benefits Miguel Cotto, because I would say Texas has a larger Mexican population and demographic. And then if it were to happen in New York, I think that would benefit Cotto, because New York has more Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and more of a demographic that I think would cater to Cotto and his crowd. So that's what I think. I think just keep it neutral. Vegas, big fights have happened there. The fight of the century or whatever with Mayweather and Pacquiao happened there. So just make it simple. So it's a 50-50 fight. Cotto, I know he wants to be the A side, and Cotto or Canelo probably thinks he's the A side. So just keep it neutral, because I don't see either guy budging and wanting to give the other person any type of leverage like that. Like, oh, this pro crowd suits me. You know what I mean? I don't know. I just don't see them wanting to. I don't see Canelo dying to want to fight Cotto at Madison Square Garden. And I don't see Cotto dying to want to fight Canelo at the Alamo Dome. You know what I mean? Just based on his history. The Alamo Dome showcased great Chavez Jr. fights and whatnot. Cotto, some of his great fights happened at Madison Square Garden. So ultimately, I think keep it even Steven and let it happen in Vegas. California too, but I think Vegas is just the city to have that particular fight. Because, I mean, where would it happen? The StubHub? That just doesn't seem like a fight that would take place at a StubHub. So keep it Vegas. That's my opinion. Let me know how you guys think I did on this particular episode. Monday Mail Day. Try to get through a lot of questions. Make sure you like my video. As always, hate, comment, and subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off.